How many people go missing in the United States every year? The National Crime Information Center, or the NCIC, reports that, on average, just under 533,000 people are entered into the database each year, or at least that's based on numbers from 2021 to 2025. That's like 70,000 more people than those who had COVID-related deaths in 2021, which was the highest year for COVID deaths in the US. There's a lot of people who go missing. The Narendra Modi Stadium in Gujarat, India, is the largest stadium in the world and holds 132,000 people for cricket matches. So we can visualize the number of people who go missing each year in the States by filling it up about 4 times. That's the average number of people that are disappearing and have entries in the FBI's NCIC database. Fortunately, most of the missing persons cases are marked resolved. For example, they can include teenagers who run away and end up returning or are located at a friend's house within a few days. Resolved sounds good, it has a good connotation, like something's done, something's completed, issues resolved. But unfortunately, resolved in missing person cases does not guarantee the condition they're found in. Resolved can also mean that the missing person's remains were located, or sometimes the case can be closed without findings, which leans into a more administrative case closed definition of resolved.
Case closed.
Sadly, cases can remain open and unresolved for years. These long-term cases are entered in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, their chances at being located diminishing each day that passes by. Despite not having been seen in years or even decades, they have not been forgotten. Their families and communities still yearn for closure, and these organizations continue requesting the public for information on their behalf. On the NamUs registry, Jim Sullivan is one of these missing people. Case number MP108617. If you were to see him today, you may be one of the first since he went missing in March of 1975. He'd look much older today, maybe unrecognizable, since he'd be 86, going on 87 years old. The man is one of countless talented musicians who deserved a spotlight, yet were unable to attain it in their time. Jim Sullivan today is most known for his once forgotten but re-emerged private press record titled U.F.O. His disappearance is imbued as part of the album's legend and identity, though the album released 6 whole years before he vanished. The release date wasn't the weird part. The lyrics throughout the project contain references to unidentified flying objects, a magic man, a levitating man, these were 2 separate men, one's Jerome and one's Johnny, and then a flying Dutchman. These folk songs have an undeniable bend to the cosmic and supernatural. Given this information, it's not hard to guess what people theorize is responsible for his sudden disappearance in March of '75. They think it's aliens.
And I'm aware of how this sounds. But
And to be fair, the story elements all fit together well, actually. It's practically a stereotype of extraterrestrial abduction. When we think of aliens, we think green humanoids with large black ovular voids for eyes. Or maybe gray if you don't prefer the campiness of the highlighter green alien. We think of Roswell, New Mexico, and due to Roswell and its proximity to Area 51, we also think of dark, expansive sands with strange lights zooming overhead, a cold desert night, an abduction. We think,
Because we're gonna get those aliens tonight. They can't stop us all.
I also think of the 4th Indiana Jones movie, for better or for worse. Jim Sullivan vanished from society on a trip from Los Angeles to Nashville while crossing through New Mexico. The tenacious folk musician was leaving LA behind, where he had not yet met the success that he was searching for. What he had accomplished there was not nothing. He had released 2 albums, actually. U.F.O, mentioned before, was released in 1969, with production backed by 3 members of the famous Wrecking Crew. For those uninformed, the Wrecking Crew were a collective of extraordinary session musicians who Phil Spector would use to create his wall of sound production style. The group of various members would play on countless hits and are legends of music history. Glenn Campbell and Leon Russell were 2 members that later enjoyed solo success. For U.F.O, members Earl Palmer on drums, Don Randy on keys, and Jimmy Bond working on production, arrangements, and playing string bass backed Sullivan for his debut record. An actor, Al Dobbs, was the one financially responsible for the record materializing. Barbara, Jim's wife, was a secretary at Capitol Records. She had tried getting her husband signed multiple times to no avail, Al Dobbs had become a close friend to Jim and Barbara by hanging out at the Raft, which is a bar in Malibu. They both lived in Sherman Oaks. After hearing Sullivan play at the bar, he was convinced of Jim's talent. He established a tiny label and bankrolled Sullivan's U.F.O. That's a lot of faith in someone, and it's underscored by Dobbs hiring these sought-after Wrecking Crew musicians to back him. Despite the undeniable talent poured into its making, U.F.O had no leftover money for marketing, and it didn't sell. Sullivan wasn't deterred and continued playing around in LA bars. More of a fun fact, he had some other Hollywood friends, chiefly Dennis Hopper. That friendship enabled him to have a small and uncredited role as a hippie extra in the commune scenes in the Oscar-nominated Easy Rider. An unlikely opportunity was granted to Sullivan to create a second album in 1972, and this one was self-titled. It was released under Hugh Hefner's new Playboy Records, a new project from Playboy that sought to diversify their portfolio. When researching, I got lucky my safe search was turned on because search results for Playboy Records doesn't necessarily yield music-based results towards the top, and I was in public. Anyway, Playboy Records had its own trouble with marketing and distribution, so much so that ABBA's first single in the US, People Need Love, commercially failed, and their manager blamed it on Playboy's incompetence in getting their records on store shelves. In hindsight, if future icons like ABBA had trouble with the label, Jim Sullivan's odds were undoubtedly hampered too. That is to say, this album sold poorly as well. When these albums were later reissued, Sullivan's son Chris stated in interviews that the Playboy LP caused a fragmentation of the Sullivan family. His parents had temporarily separated, and Jim was going across the country in 1975 for Nashville, another shot at signing to a label in the capital of country music. He traveled in his Beetle with his 12-string guitar, a box of his records, clothes, and what cash he had with him. After Jim found a stable place in Nashville, his wife and son were planned to join him there. March 4th, 1975 was the day he left for Nashville. Barbara had received a call from him the next day. She states that he spoke cryptically and something felt off. When she asked if there was anything wrong, he waved himself off. "Forget it. Just forget I said anything. I'll call you from Nashville." These were likely the last words spoken to his wife, and one of the last times he would speak to anyone as far as we know. Barbara would learn that Jim had been pulled over for reckless driving. He was apparently swerving and suspected of DUI just 15 hours into his trip. He had made it as far as Santa Rosa, New Mexico. He did pass the sobriety test, and the officer made a strong recommendation to find some lodging for rest. Jim complied and checked into the La Mesa motel. He would be seen purchasing a handle of vodka by a local some short time later. After a few days without contact, Barbara and her sister were concerned and called police and hospitals along the route. They learned of this traffic stop near Santa Rosa, and the police performed a wellness check. They must have knocked on the motel door and, without an answer, opened the unlocked door. Upon investigation, the room and sheets were fresh. It appeared his room at La Mesa had been entered and promptly abandoned. Presumably, he left to get the alcohol. None of his belongings were there. On March 8th, his Volkswagen Beetle was found 26 miles south of Santa Rosa on the ranch owned by the Genettis family. It contained all he had traveled with, his prized guitar, the records, his cash, and clothes, but no vodka and no final notes. Jim was nowhere to be found. Search parties combed the small pass-through town. The discovery of a corpse was a promising breakthrough. It was located just miles from his last known location. It was presumed to be him, yet it was identified to be someone else by the police. Another member of the town stated he had offered Jim a ride since it had been cold in the desert that night, but Jim declined. Another local claimed they had spotted Jim's Beetle at the Genetti family's ranch that evening, where it was ultimately located. It said he was speaking with a family member of the Genettis, but there's not much evidence around the claim. Though, arousing greater suspicion, the Genetti family would relocate to Hawaii shortly after Jim's disappearance. Then the sheriff retired. Because of this, a mob theory originated around the Genettis that they were dangerous Italians that had come from Chicago and sealed Jim's fate. Did this mob family have him whacked? It occurs to me that maybe the other corpse, or countless others that were undiscovered, were the actual targets. If they were actually the mob, that is. They picked a sketchy time to up and leave to an island 2,500 miles away. But maybe they were just trying to escape the rumor mill that had begun spinning in Santa Rosa, bolstered perhaps by harmful anti-Italian stereotypes.
I'll tell you what it is. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
For example, Francis Ford Coppola's highly successful Godfather had been followed by Godfather 2 in 1974, and Italians would have been strange for New Mexican plains. The run-in with police and the sheriff quickly retiring after the fact may suggest foul play by the police. They were in total control of the investigation. The locating and dismissing of the other corpse may have been a deliberate cover-up. The body was never publicly identified and remained a John Doe. In the 2010 interviews, that Good Samaritan who had offered a ride, while his son, Donald Senya, remarked that he believed the investigation was too short-lived and something had been afoot. There's a few clues that hint he may have been responsible, whether deliberately or inadvertently, for his own vanishing. For example, his manager Robert Buster Ginter claimed they had a late night conversation regarding how they would disappear should they ever have to. Normal topics, I guess, you discuss late night. He claims Jim stated he'd walk out into the desert and never come back. If he had been sleep-deprived and drunk, or, and I hate to suggest it, but distraught and depressed about his career, he may have wandered into the moonlit desert, staring into the stars, and maybe he had seen something overhead. Both Jim and Barbara had been fascinated by UFOs, astrology, reincarnation, and general mysticism. Chris, their son, described that Barbara believed Jim was up there in the stars waiting for her somewhere. The lyrics on his song, So Natural, reflected on his brother's passing, and how mourners remarked he looked so natural in death at the viewing. Jim laments,
"It's my time to go. I just want the wind to blow my ashes until they're completely out of sight."
In the end, we'll never know if his time to go was chosen by him, occasioned on incidentally, decided on by someone else, or he was welcomed up by the cosmic entities he sang about. Light in the Attic Records conducted their investigation in preparation to reissue U.F.O in 2010. In 2019, they reissued the self-titled second album, originally with Playboy Records. To top it off, they also released a group of his demos, stripped-back versions of his songs that you would have likely heard, as they describe, in those Malibu bars he frequented. We'll likely never know definitively of Jim's fate. What we do know is his wish on So Natural was honored, and we are fortunate Jim Sullivan and his craft has been spiritually found so many years after his disappearance. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you consider subscribing too if you enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend listening to the album U.F.O. U.F.O, the title track, is an idyllic, breezy piece. He sings of adoring the sky and watching it with a glassy eye, as if it's a show, and the beauty of it makes him wonder if God came by UFO. That chorus hook is answered with trippy, almost theremin-like delayed flute, followed by warm and comforting brass. It's very loungy and futuristic sounding. Jim and the Wrecking Crew's musicianship really shines on the track. My other favorite tracks were So Natural, Rosie, and Plain As Your Eyes Can See. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy your day.